Yeah, I mean, it's an unprecedented arrangement if you consider it simply an export tax. What we understand from sourcing is like this is a quid pro quo that export licenses for Nvidia and AMD to be permitted to sell a specific chip that each of the companies had designed for the Chinese market. They will give up 15% of future revenues. And, the math's important. Historically, those numbers you were going over in the prior segment, 24% for AMD, 13% for Nvidia, those are from the last fiscal year. And the state of play has been that Nvidia and AMD have not been allowed to sell product directly into China. They haven't done. Nvidia is the only company that's commented on this reporting and story, and they did so very purposefully, saying we have not yet shipped any of our so-called H20 chip. But the market, in one hand, sees this as really positive. They have been campaigning to be able to sell into China, and on the other hand, there's a cautionary tale because they'll pay a levy on it, in the billions of dollars on a fiscal year basis. And China may have something to say about it, but this is all according to people familiar, of course.
Hey, and what could this mean for Nvidia and AMD pushing, even deeper into the Chinese market?
So Nvidia in particular, Jensen Huang, the CEO, has been very consistent that it's important to have access to the Chinese market because 50% of all of the research in the world that goes into AI is either being done in China or it's being done by a Chinese national. There is a deep research, R&D, development footprint, call it what you will. And if you look at the sell side reaction this morning, the analysts all back Jensen on this line of argument that if you're not allowed to sell American technology into China, you're handing that market over to a domestic champion. In this case, it's Huawei. And that's not a new warning. Jensen Huang has come on Bloomberg Television and made a very explicit warning on that. Behind closed doors, as we've reported, he's met with President Trump in the White House and discussed that. But before all of these restrictions came into place, the important bit was that China was a really big end market, and the policy of the current administration kind of took that away with immediate effect from, in Nvidia's case, America's most important technology company. They would love to be getting back to booking billions of dollars of revenues on a fiscal quarter basis. But at the really key, they're not yet currently able to. This reporting around a deal that would allow them to is very interesting, but again, unprecedented.
It seems like there's a thread here. If you think about President Trump and his ability or willingness or need to generate revenue from some of our exports from the technology companies, whether it's a direct investment by Apple into U.S. manufacturing or these export type taxes here. Is this kind of a theme that's developing in Silicon Valley?
The administration loves big round numbers, especially when it comes to investments by technology companies into domestic operations. The thing about this specific piece of reporting, 15% of China-specific revenues, is you can model for it. Paul, better than anyone, the sell side must be having a field day this morning because they can start doing the math and they'll say, okay, in the most bullish scenario, Nvidia might book $7 billion of revenue in fiscal 2Q 2026. Oh my goodness, America's going to book $1 billion of tax or $1 billion of cost on that. And so, the president is getting it done his way. But the question that we don't know and we don't have the reporting on it is whose idea was this? The companies themselves, or was it some deal making by the president? You'd expect that giving up 15% is better than having zero, and they'd rather have that China market access.
So how is China expected to react to all this?
So in two different ways. There is the concern that is emerging out of China that having American technology come into the country in the form of a high-performance GPU or an AI chip gives some security risk to China's national security because of the accusation that Nvidia and AMD have engineered some sort of backdoor access into that technology, something that both companies dispute and refute unwaveringly. So that's the first part. And then you go back to the domestic champion bit. The H20 in Nvidia's case and the MI308 in AMD's case were specifically engineered for the Chinese market to make compromises to both sides. They're very low performance chips relative to what is at the cutting edge for both of those companies. And Huawei is the leader in China, domestically speaking. It has chips that are better than those chips that our American companies have for export. So they also don't want to give up some of that momentum. And it will be interesting to see, because you guys probably would have seen what's going on with lithium and CATL in the markets this morning as well. This has become a point of bargaining and negotiation between two countries. Technology going into China in exchange for raw materials going the other way. But there are pros and cons that each side's weighing up, and it's not a perfect swap right now.